to meeting number 5 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 24th, 21. The Board of Internal Economy requires that committees adhere to the following health protocols, which are in effect until February 28th, 2022. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Masks must be worn in committee rooms except when members are at their place during parliamentary proceedings. However, it's strongly recommended that members wear a mask even when they are at their place during parliamentary proceedings. All those inside the committee room should follow best practices of maintaining a physical distance of at least 2 meters from others and maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer provided in the committee room and regularly wash your hands well with soap. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures. I'd like to outline a few other rules to follow. Interpretation services are available. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you have the choice of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will have that corrected. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly, and when you are not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. A reminder that all comments will be addressed to me as the chair. The committee clerk and I will maintain a list of speaking lists for all members. We are continuing a study of the Canada-United States relationships and its impacts on the electric vehicle, softwood lumber, and other sectors. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, the committee is resuming its study on Canada-United States relationships and its impact. With us today by video conference are Karim Zaghib, Professor, Concordia University, Professor of Practice, McGill University. Aluminum Association of Canada, Jean Simard, President and Chief Executive. Kennedy, Vice President, Trade and International Policy. Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mark Agnew, Senior Vice President, Policy and Government Relations. Canadian Steel Producers Association, Catherine Cobden, President and Chief Executive Officer. Global Automakers of Canada, David Adams, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks from each of our witnesses, followed by rounds of questions. Mr. Zaghib, I now invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My relationship with the United States goes back to 27 years as main researcher in the Quebec Hydro Institute. The U.S. Department of Energy awarded me a number of research contracts, and I collaborated with most of the national laboratories, PNN and others. And I also conducted research for the United States Advanced Battery Consortium, USABC, created by Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. From June 2020 to December 2021, I served as strategic advisor to Investment Quebec and the Quebec government. Thanks to my international contacts and 36 years of experience with lithium-ion batteries, I could open doors, especially in the United States, for Investment Quebec. And recognizing the Quebec ecosystem and recycling. And we have different methods.
Responsibly on secure and stable chain supply from mine to electric vehicle to recycling in order to become independent from Asian suppliers and support our local industry. Canada has the potential to transform critical minerals locally in active materials to sell to vehicle body to electric motors at low cost with zero CO2 emission, thanks to renewable energy and hydroelectricity. For next 20 years, lithium-ion battery will be dominate the market for electric vehicles. Lithium-ion battery is constituted of copper, graphite, silicon, lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, iron, and phosphate. All these elements are found, for example, in Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Labrador, British Columbia, and Manitoba. As an attractive supply for critical mineral for electric vehicle manufacturers in United States and most important in Canada. To shift to electric vehicle is a great opportunity to create jobs, to revive vehicle manufacturing industry in Canada, in particular in Ontario and in Québec. Le Canada et les États-Unis ont tout intérêt à former une initiative commune sur les véhicules électriques, en incorporant, formant le capital humain pour pallier.
And fighting the issue of shortage and involving research groups, colleges, universities, manufacturers, and technologists developed in Canada through mutual agreements and technological transfer in the manufacturing sector.
Success story concerning electric vehicle and battery for future Canada, United States. Partnership in lithium-ion battery is iron phosphate, which Professor John Goodenough was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2019 and originated from collaboration between University of Texas and Hydro-Quebec. Today, LFP recognized as the safest battery technology and notably used by Tesla. China was early adopters of this technology for electric vehicles, buses, which CATL, number one, and BYD are largest producers of the cells. Canada
and the U.S. should create a scientific committee on innovation, intellectual property, industrialization to encourage the market penetration of common technologies in electric vehicles and energy storage applications. In that way, the two countries could be pioneers in lithium-ion batteries and beyond to reduce the time and cost needed to develop materials for batteries, vehicle bodies, and electric motors. It is vital that the federal government and the provinces provide funding for up to 50% of battery and electric vehicle manufacturing plant proposals by making available turnkey sites with access to water, electricity, natural gas in strategic locations that simplify transportation logistics.
Bring back national industry of microelectronics, chips manufacturing are essential for civil electronics component in electric vehicles and batteries, such battery management system and battery management unit. Un autre aspect à développer
Another aspect to develop in Canada and US is uniformizing and standardizing the ultra-rapid charge electric grids and to facilitate universal payments with credit cards or debit cards. I would also propose that Canada sets up a strategic committee on critical minerals for batteries by stressing the traceability and the origin of the minerals, reducing greenhouse effects, and also respecting human rights. This committee can also come up with protocols to contribute to cell and battery production technologies with the goal of producing process control machines locally in Canada and in the US. The two countries must standardize incentives for purchasing electric vehicles while waiting for the lithium-ion battery packs to drop below $100 per kilowatt hour, which is parity with the cost of a gas vehicle. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
I just finished.
Thank you. Mr. Simard for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Simard.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to the committee members for inviting the alumni. As members of the committee well know by now, aluminium is part of the new narrative in world geopolitics. A critical material as listed in Canada, Europe, and the US, it has been the object of a series of trade confrontations over the last 5 years, with resulting anti-dumping and countervailing duties, tariffs, and TRQs. While Europe and the US have been at the forefront of these measures, China's state-subsidized growth and dominance of world markets is mostly to blame for this situation, as documented by the OECD. This just shows how our metal is strategic now and for the future. As the world is moving out of the pandemic, and supply chains resilience and decarbonization are on the agenda, the US, like other world powers, is attempting to seize the momentum and redraw its industrial web to the benefits of its workers, communities, and markets. As we enter the carbon trade era, where CO2 is on everyone's balance sheet, reaching for the bottom line, responsibly produced low CO2 minerals and metals stand to create value for Canada while answering the world's growing demand for responsible sustainability. With its resource-based economy, Canada stands to gain through trade more than ever. Our industry ships most of its responsibly produced low CO2 metal to the US, representing 70% of their imports in recent years, with multi-billion dollars in yearly exports for Canada, a significant contributor to our trade balance. The US market is our market, and by far. Canada is their key supplier, and by far. Maintaining the global competitiveness of our industry and its free access to market, especially in the US, is therefore fundamental. Our 8,800 workers and 9 plants smelt and ship the most responsibly produced low CO2 metal going into the US. The US is now pivoting towards bilateral managed trade agreements, replacing the past administration's tariff-based approach, as witnessed with the EU, Japan, and forthcoming Great Britain. While dealing with non-market economies and carbon are part of this new narrative, they are still establishing their bearings on the use of climate-based trade instruments. National security, protectionism, and managed trade are all reactions to a perceived threat. Canada has never been, is not, and never will be such a threat to the US. As mentioned at the beginning, the economic world order has been gradually disrupted by China's dominance in key base industrial sectors, be it steel, magnesium, or aluminum, as well as rare earths. China dominates markets. We are, as an industry, as an economy, and as a country, impacted by China's subsidies and non-market behavior, and the carbon leakage associated to it. Considering these two priorities for the new administration, we think that Canada must find alignment with the US on dealing with non-market economies and carbon transfer. The global arrangement on sustainable steel and aluminum with Europe is a case in point. It clearly states, and I quote, "The global arrangement will be open to any interested country that shares our commitment to achieving the goals of restoring market orientation and reducing trade in carbon-intensive steel and aluminum products," end of quote. While Canada has its own trade agreement with the US and the EU, restoring rules-based markets and carbon trade reduction should be on our priorities list. And we should make it clear to all interested parties. Canada must not only act on these issues, but must also be clearly seen to doing so. Working with the US and our allies would contribute to more multilateralism to the benefit of all parties. Canada should also push for a buy clean approach in government procurement with the US, calling for responsibly produced low CO2 solutions. In closing, while we were invited to comment on specific files such as EV and others, we firmly believe that our relationship with our most important trading partner deserves a broader approach at the crossroads of climate change and competitiveness. We need to re-engage on common grounds, aligning on shared values. We must also nurture this relationship at all levels, all year round. We saw through the last round of COSMA negotiations how much we had taken each other for granted during all those years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simard. Sorry, I have to cut you off in order to make sure we're accommodating everyone. Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, please.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for the invitation today to speak about or participate in your meeting on Canada-US relationship. The Business Council of Canada is composed of 170 chief executives and entrepreneurs of Canada's leading enterprises. Our members directly or indirectly support more than 6 million jobs across the country and hundreds of thousands of small businesses. Since our establishment more than 4 decades ago, the Canada-US partnership has always been a top priority for our members. We played a critical role in supporting the development of the first free trade agreement and its expansion to include Mexico and NAFTA, as well as in our new framework, the CUSMA. Canada is a trading nation. Our prosperity and living standards depend on it. 60% of our GDP is tied directly to trade, and the bulk of this trade is with the United States. As of 2020, it accounted for 73% of Canada's merchandise exports and 53% of our services exports. And 2 million jobs, Canadian jobs, are related to exports to the United States. This relationship is mutually beneficial. Nearly 9 million jobs in the United States depend on cross-border trade and investment with Canada, and we're the largest or among the largest export customers for most states. From financial institutions and auto part manufacturers to energy, aerospace, and high-tech industries, our members have deep connections to the U.S., creating jobs and benefiting communities on both sides of the border. The long-standing Canada-U.S. economic partnership has been tested in recent years and is in jeopardy of further deterioration if we do not take steps to strengthen it. And we believe Canada needs a new strategy to do that. So today I'm going to speak about 3 ideas that we believe can advance our relationship with the United States. So first, with respect to our relationship with the Biden administration, and as we have heard from Ambassador Cohen, we have a useful tool to enhance bilateral ties with the roadmap for a renewed U.S.-Canada partnership. This document has considerable breadth, and we already have made progress in certain areas. But as the federal government thinks about its international and domestic policies going forward, including in the upcoming budget, it should consider what actions we can take to make progress on this roadmap and to accomplish shared objectives between our countries. These include efforts to enhance supply chain resiliency and improve North American competitiveness. There's also considerable scope for collaboration to combat climate change and to facilitate energy transition, including by enhancing the cross-border clean electricity grid, expanding production of battery electric vehicles, and stimulating the development of low carbon opportunities such as critical minerals, carbon capture, hydrogen, and small modular reactors. On the second point, Canada is fortunate to have the CUSMA, a modern, progressive, and enforceable framework for trade, and we cannot take this agreement for granted. We need to ensure that there's continued support for the agreement through implementation and by proactively communicating its benefits and presenting it as a foundation for regional competitiveness. Canada must work closely with our American and Mexican allies to promote this shared priority. And the third point, we need a new permanent Team Canada to address the challenges of today and into the future. This team should leverage people-to-people ties both in Washington and at the state level to constantly communicate the shared benefits of Canada-US trade and investment, as well as to ensure government, business, labor, and other stakeholders are working towards shared objectives. This requires being proactive rather than waiting for the next trade irritant to arise. The team must develop a plan to advance Canada's interests and be ready to act quickly in a coordinated fashion. So just to conclude, Canada faces various challenges, some old and some new. While not everything is linked to a shift in trade policy, we should all focus on what we can do as a country to change the direction and prospects for this critical relationship. The Business Council of Canada and its members stand ready to support efforts to build a more stable and prosperous Canada-US relationship and competitive North America. So thank you for this opportunity and I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I think the chair is having some communication problems. So why don't we go on to our next witness? I think our next witness is Mr. Agnew, Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Relations at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you for that, Chair, for the introduction, and honourable members. It's a pleasure to be back at the committee for my first appearance at the 44th Parliament, and good to see both new and familiar faces. And certainly the Canadian Chamber is quite glad to see that the House of Commons Standing Committee International Trade. Oh, sorry, was the Chair trying to? I will keep going. No, and just to say, we're glad to see that the House of Commons Trade Committee has decided to prioritize a Canada-U.S. study. And I think certainly, as in any relationship that's this, vast, there's going to be complexities and there's going to be frictions that do emerge. And perhaps I just start off by saying a brief word about three of those challenges. The first, that we have heard from some members concerns about the implications of the U.S. EV tax credit proposal in the Build Back Better legislation. And although, as of today, the Build Back Better legislation looks comatose, the Canadian Chamber, as a matter of general principle, certainly remains concerned with measures that would reinforce Buy American principles and that would disrupt cross-border supply chains and put Canadian-based operations at a potential competitive disadvantage. And I should actually just note and sort of add parenthetically to thank the honorable members on this committee that have been active in taking a stand against various Buy American measures that have come from Washington, D.C. Second, I'd also like to note, of course, the committee's interest in the softwood lumber issue. And for longer than I've been wearing a suit jacket and a tie, this has been a significant trade irritant. And certainly we are disappointed to see the continued application of tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber exports to the United States. And we're hoping to see that there will be negotiations that start towards a renewed softwood lumber agreement. And I think the imperative from the Canadian Chamber membership was underscored at our last in-person AGM in 2019, where delegates overwhelmingly passed a resolution calling on the government to be able to initiate negotiations towards a new softwood lumber deal. The third irritant I think that's worth highlighting is the ongoing discussions around Line 5, and proposals like the one to shut down Line 5 I think are a perfect illustration of what happens when evidence-based policymaking goes out the window. And certainly, businesses on both sides of the border do want to see a greener economy, but energy security does play a crucial role in the decarbonization process, because if we can't have certainty on where our energy and fuel supplies are coming from, it becomes much more harder to advance a conversation about decarbonization in the economy. And certainly having more oil moved by trucks and trains is a much less safe mode of transportation. However, as someone who has the vantage point of being able to look at the breadth of the relationship from many sectors, we often do find ourselves in the sort of supplicant position, if I can put it that way. And as I've said at this committee and in other forums, there's no one in Washington, D.C. that's waking up in the morning looking to do us a favor. And I think it therefore remains critical to A, not make unforced moves like, for example, the retroactive application of a digital services tax that risks retaliation. And I think what we instead need to do is proactively work with the United States on shared challenges and not let initiatives like the Roadmap Partnership wither on the vine. If I can just say a brief word to end off on three items that I would put forward for the committee's consideration. First is collaboration on critical minerals and being able to leverage the joint action plan that was launched several years ago, and ensuring that we actually are able to have North American supply chain to support defense, consumer, and industrial applications. The second is strengthening the continental defense industrial base. Economic and national security are inherently linked together and can't be separated. And certainly we need to renew the strategic framework for defense industrial cooperation, and also leveraging opportunities like NORAD modernization to be able to have a strong industrial development component to help Canadian companies. And lastly, of course, is supply chain resiliency, a major topic of discussion in Ottawa, Washington, and capitals around the world. The Prime Minister and the President created a supply chain working group on the margins of the North American Leaders Summit last autumn, and certainly we urge the government to engage industry in those efforts to ensure that real-world progress is being made, and also renewing initiatives like the Regulatory Cooperation Council and having refreshed work plans that reflect our challenges. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agnew. On to Ms. Cobden for 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for the chance to appear before you again as you undertake this very important study on Canada-U.S. relations. I'm here today representing Canada's steel industry. My members produce 13 million tons of steel, pipe, and tube products annually and support 123,000 jobs directly and indirectly across 5 Canadian provinces from Alberta to Quebec. Canada's steel sector plays a strategically vital role in the North American economy, and we are advanced manufacturers of a 100% recyclable and low carbon product. We are a critical supplier to many key North American sectors, including the automotive sector, energy, construction, and various general manufacturing applications. And as you well know, we operate in a highly integrated marketplace with the United States. We are a sector that knows firsthand how critical it is to maintain open access to the trading relationship between Canada and the United States. Access to that market is paramount for our industry. About half of what we produce in a year heads to the United States. As context for my remarks, let me say, while the last year has been unprecedented in terms of market conditions, it's very currently, as you well know, we're facing simultaneously the impact of supply chain disruption, Omicron absenteeism, ongoing global overcapacity challenges, and last but not least, protectionism moves by the United States. So we're committed to working with the United States to expand trade and to strengthen the resiliency of our supply chains with our largest trading partner, but we cannot support measures that jeopardize the long-term global competitiveness of our industry and of our industry's customers. Unfortunately, we are seeing a shift away from the spirit of the USMCA, be it Buy America policy, softwood lumber. We have talked about a number of them here already. This trend is highly alarming and we need to take it seriously. The CSPA, in that vein, encourages all levels of government to ensure that they were taking a comprehensive and coordinated approach in our dealings with the United States as we move forward. This is an approach where we both stand up for our interests, of course, but also seek to work together to address issues of common concern and mutual opportunity. For example, in the steel side, we share a deep concern for the growing and significant global overcapacity that we're seeing from a range of nations, particularly China, but also ASEAN, Iran, Turkey, etc. Global overcapacity translates to unfair traded imports in the North American economy. In this vein, there remains significant opportunity to demonstrate to our largest trading partner that our trade tools are keeping pace with the ever-evolving practices of unfair traders. There's a widespread and growing problem with the circumvention of trade remedies. As a result, it is critical that we update our trade laws to ensure adequate enforcement. Tools such as anti-circumvention legislation, enhanced import monitoring are required to both protect our domestic market, but also to show to the US that we're keeping pace. Tangible steps can be taken in this regard. We must implement urgently trade remedy modernization recommendations that were consulted on in the last budget. We hope that the detailed recommendations that we have submitted this fall to the government are incorporated in budget 2022. They provide tangible and real-life examples of how we can seek stronger alignment between Canada and the United States and address key gaps in our trade measures that exist today. Finally, the United States is introducing climate measures into all areas of its trade policy. Canada would do very well to note and engage early on this, as the outcomes could be very significant to Canadian industry. Of particular note is the recent deal struck on climate between the US and the EU on steel and aluminum. While much of the details of this agreement are yet to be worked out, it is a clear shift by the US to deter trade with higher carbon emitting jurisdictions such as China. Here we see a potential opportunity for Canada, given the successful environmental track record of Canadian steel producers and many other production capabilities in Canada, and some of our specific examples of, our green track record, our goal to be net zero, et cetera. We believe we should not shy away from engaging with the US and seeking alignment with them on climate trade matters. This may indeed become an imperative in the months and years ahead.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cobden. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I was just going to thank you.
On to Mr. Adams for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Adams, you need to unmute yourself, please.
That would help. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of the 15 members of the Global Automakers of Canada, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. Our members include Canada's largest automaker, Toyota, who last year produced more vehicles than Ford, GM, and Stellantis combined, and Honda, Canada's second largest automaker last year, in addition to 13 exclusive Canadian distributors of their brand in our country. Last year, our members represented 62% of all vehicle sales in Canada and 65% of all light-duty vehicle production. Further, our members were responsible for providing 56% of the EVs to consumers who purchased them under the Canadian government's ISEV program. As other witnesses have already alluded to in their representations before the committee, the protectionist actions currently being pursued on a variety of fronts by the American administration represent an existential threat not only to the softwood lumber and automotive industries, but the broader Canadian economy. With respect to our industry, the proposed EV tax credit included under the Build Back Better bill, which is the subject of this committee's investigation, is very problematic. However, I would suggest that the mere threat of this EV tax credit has already had the desired effect from a US public policy perspective by creating an uncertain economic climate that has encouraged more foreign direct investment in the United States while largely freezing out the consideration of Canada as an investment jurisdiction. Having been around this industry through the negotiation of the Canada-US FTA, the NAFTA, and the recent CUSMA, what is clear is that trade agreements only work if the signatory parties support a rules-based international order by upholding the precepts of free and fair trade agreements to which their leaders have attached their signatures. The CUSMA USMCA trade deal is less than 2 years old, and already in the automotive industry, we have 2 flagrant violations of the provisions of that agreement, which have strained our historically beneficial trading relationship with the US. So where does that leave Canada? The reality is that policymakers in the United States do not consider Canada and the effect of their decisions on our trading relationship. We are not on their radar screen, and Canada is caught right now in a geopolitical crossfire between the United States and China, and to a lesser degree Europe, when it comes to the issue of the new decarbonized automotive industry. The United States has fallen significantly behind those leading jurisdictions when it comes to both electric vehicle production and battery production, and now is in the fight of its life to ensure the key components of EVs and the vehicles themselves are built in America and sold to Americans. In this regard, Canada is collateral damage. Looking more closely at the EV tax credit, one can observe that one component, the extra $4,500 credit, if the vehicle is built in a union plant, is derivative of President Biden's strong union support from the UAW, which he will need to continue to curry favor through this year's midterm elections. On this issue, I will only say that many of my members' parent sister companies produce EVs in non-union facilities in the United States. And not only does this provision discriminate against these companies on the basis of union representation or lack thereof, but will create a significant hurdle for the president to overcome in reaching his own targets of 50% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2030, when only a small subset of the vehicles are eligible for the more robust credit. On this issue, American legislators frankly see the inequity of the discrimination based on whether or not workers in America are represented by a union. It is far more difficult to get any American legislators to take up the mantle and argue against American taxpayers' money only going to incentivize vehicles built in the United States, aside from the fact that such a stance is offside American international trade obligations. What should Canada do? Canada should act forcefully to ensure that the negotiated provisions of the CUSMA are enforced and explore all measures to defend itself against this flagrant violation. Canada, in consultation with the automotive industry, should consider all appropriate retaliatory mechanisms should the provisions of the EV tax credit reappear in a new Build Back Better bill. Canada should not seek a so-called carve-in for Canadian-built EVs, meaning we should not accord EVs built in the US with the same basic $7,500 incentive, an additional $4,500 if built in a union plant, and an additional $500 if the battery is built in Canada. This is poor public policy. Two wrongs do not make a right, and Canada could expect to be challenged at the WTO for taking such a stance. Such an incentive would severely hinder Canada's objective of achieving 50% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2030 and 100% by 2035. It would also set up a significant competitive disadvantage for those not building zero-emission vehicles in North America to meet what we understand will be a mandated emissions target.
Mr. Adams, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt.
Sure. Thanks very much. I have one more point, if I could just make it, Madam Chair. Just to reiterate what others have said, that Canada should prioritize the development and continuation of sustained relationships with all levels of the U.S. government, not just in crisis moments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I know how important all these issues are for everyone. On to our members. Mr. Lewis, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses this afternoon. Once again, fantastic testimony, so I appreciate it. I got a lot of questions. I'll probably only get through a few of them, but it's a great start. First question, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Adams. So I don't expect you, Mr. Adams, to speak on behalf of Jennifer Savavian. I met with her a couple of months ago. She's with Auto Drive America. And she said that a rebate incentive would only limit consumer choice. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on a U.S. rebate on U.S. EVs? What would that have on our auto trade sales and limiting consumer choice?
Well, I think if what you're asking, Honourable Member, is whether or not Canada adopted that same type of incentive, what impact that would have. If that's the question, then I think, as I said in my comments, that it would limit the opportunity for consumers to purchase vehicles, because that more robust incentive would only apply to a limited number of vehicles that would be built in Canada or the United States. And that's at odds with Canada's other objective of getting more zero-emission vehicles on the road, especially under a zero-emission vehicle mandate, which the government is currently considering as well.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Back through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Adams again. So if I heard you right, Mr. Adams, I believe you said your members put approximately 56% of the EVs on the road that received a federal IZEV initiative. Can you expand a little bit further on that, please?
Sure. Well, as the committee may or may not know, the federal government has put in place a federal incentive program for zero-emission vehicles, up to $5,000. There are certain constraints on that program in terms of there are MSRP caps, for instance, on the vehicles that are eligible, which currently sit, I believe, around $45,000. So any vehicle priced over $45,000 is not eligible for the incentive, but Canadians, regardless of the province that they live in, can apply. Well, actually, the incentive occurs at the point of sale at the dealership.
Excellent, thank you. And again, sir, back to you. Sorry to put you on the spot so early.
No
worries. For you, Madam Chair. So to your understanding, Mr. Adams, what currently is Canada's zero emissions policy, and how is it, or is it not, how has it impacted the auto trade sector in Canada? And if it has, what can be done to alleviate it or make it better or stronger?
Well, right now, I guess zero-emission vehicles would fall under the current greenhouse gas emissions regulations. So we would argue that the more stringent those regulations are made, then you end up effectively with a de facto zero-emission vehicle mandate, because the only way that vehicle manufacturers would be able to attain those emission standards under increasingly more stringent regulations would be to put more zero-emission vehicles on the road. As far as zero-emission vehicle legislation is concerned in Canada, 2 provinces right now currently have what are called zero-emission vehicle mandates, British Columbia and Quebec, each province requiring manufacturers to meet a certain percentage of zero-emission vehicle sales. As we move forward in increasingly more stringent levels as we move forward. And the federal government, as I mentioned, is currently looking at introducing a national zero-emission vehicle mandate.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Madam Chair, how much time left, please?
2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Agnew, I'm going to turn my attention over to you, sir. Thank you for your testimony as well. You said 2 things that really impact the Essex-Windsor area, and of course that's supply chain resiliency and Line 5. And I know that impacts more than Essex-Windsor, but I'm going to suggest we're kind of the front lines, and obviously what's happening down in Essex-Windsor right now with the supply chain and our borders is going to have a major effect, and it's a major trickle-down effect, but not only for the Ambassador Bridge, but for the Blue Water Bridge and the Peace Bridge in Niagara Falls, and so I'm very much aware of that, so thanks for bringing that up. With regard to Line 5, and so I'm just curious, with regard to your industry, your manufacturers, If Line 5, if we can't come to a solution between Canada and Michigan or Canada and the United States, is there a dollar figure you could put to that with regard to the impact of the industry or a percentage? Like, just how significant is Line 5, and that all people get back to the table and discuss this moving forward? Because I heard a lot of, I'm going to call it anxiousness in your remarks, and of course I'm anxious on this too, as many of us are. I'm just curious, do you have any numbers for that, sir?
I can commit to following up via the clerk and the chair with the numbers that we do have. I don't have them to hand. I think certainly, qualitatively there is the concern about transportation infrastructure that's in the southwestern Ontario region that risks not having the fuel that it needs to move. Whether it's trucks or aircraft with what's going through the Line 5 pipeline, though. But I would have to be follow up with some numbers for the committee's consideration.
And I'm assuming I only got about time for one more minute. So I'll stick with you,
You have 36 seconds, sir.
Oh, well, I'll go very, very, now, you know what? I'll give it over to my friends across the way here, and I'm going to work collectively. See that? We work together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. On to Mr. Varani for 6 minutes, please.
So if that means I have 6.5 minutes, I'll thank Mr. Lewis right now. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'm going to start with Ms. Cobden, actually, because you mentioned something that came up in some of the testimony of some of the other witnesses as well, but you talked a little bit about the nature of the shift that's going on with the Biden administration and the fact that they're looking very vigorously at carbon reduction and reducing carbon-intensive programs, and the fact that they want to do trade with entities that have positive sort of carbon policies in place and greener policies in place. And you mentioned specifically their orientation vis-a-vis the EU on that front as it compares with China. Can you tell me from your perspective, Ms. Cobden, when we've got a situation where we've got a track record of significant policy that has been implemented here in Canada, including things such as pricing, putting a price on carbon pollution, what does that do in terms of our competitive advantage when we are dealing with the Biden administration and putting our best foot forward as a green partner with which to deal with?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, in fact, I believe that Canada is very well positioned to put our hand up, and we should put our hand up and say we want in as well. When you take a look at the specifics, and both Jean and I, by the way, we were referencing the same agreement because it applies to both aluminum and steel. When you take a look at that, you see that this is a trade agenda with partners that are willing to be green. And on the steel side, I can say what's very powerful is that the North American steel industry has the best climate performance of any steel industry in the world collectively. And that, of course, applies specifically to the Canadian steel industry, but that's right across North America. So I see this as a tremendous opportunity, not just with the regulatory structure we have in place, and with the vision we have in place, but also because the industries themselves have that green performance. So my only caution, if I may offer one, is that we must really work in lockstep with our trading partner and not rush out ahead too far on important items like border carbon adjustment mechanisms, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to build on this a little bit because we've heard a little bit about sort of what we're doing federally, but also just in terms of this committee hearing, we've also heard about what's going on in certain provinces. And I know that in some provinces around the country, we're moving in the same direction with things such as replicating our support for the EV industry. That support is also being shown in BC and Quebec. It was being shown by the province of Ontario until a change of government occurred in 2018. So could you comment on when a change of government occurs at the provincial level and EV tax credits that were once there are summarily removed, what impact does that have on sort of promoting that green advantage that Canada offers? So if you could perhaps comment on that, Ms. Cobden, and also Monsieur Simard.
Well, I actually think that question might be better placed to the automotive sector. But what I can say is no matter where the Canadian steel industry is being produced, where the steel is being produced in Canada, we are meeting and exceeding, the best there is in the world. We are number one in the world on one production type and number two in another. And this is where there's, 50, 60 nations around the world producing steel. So we can hold our head up high. I would advocate, as I always do, in cross-border deliberations, that we are aligned federally, provincially. We don't have to be aligned on the exact minutia, but in terms of the intent and the content of the dialogue. And I do think climate is a place where we do need to have that alignment and those cross-border discussions.
Monsieur Simard?
Yeah, I totally agree with Catherine. Our industry has the lowest carbon footprint in the world and is moving on to no carbon footprint eventually with the ELYSIS project. We're anchored in two provinces that have carbon pricing mechanism, namely BC with its tax and Quebec with its cap and trade system. So where we can very robustly approach any system in the world in any trading block, both with our footprint and the pricing mechanism that passed the test of the World Trade Organization or any other organization. So basically the message here is Canada has a natural advantage, a very highly competitive natural advantage moving forward in the quest to decarbonizing the world. Let's get on the ice.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to put the last question to Mr. Kennedy. A number of people in this panel have talked about CUSMA, and you mentioned about not taking it for granted is one of the notes that I had jotted down, and that we've got this agreement and it's been modernized. I wonder if you could comment, because we've heard some testimony at other meetings at this committee about CUSMA and the dispute settlement mechanisms and how that's been improved in favor of Canada and countries like Mexico. And I know that we've joined a piece of litigation that has been initiated by the Mexicans with respect to things like country of origin labeling. Now that applies in the auto sector and specifically to the component parts of the automotive vehicle. So can you just comment for the committee about those improvements on the dispute settlement mechanisms within CUSMA and what that does for Canada and Canada's position?
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask for a very brief answer to a very long question.
Sir, just very briefly, not only for Canada and Mexico, but also for the United States, we now have a framework that there's confidence in. It's enforceable, and we're seeing some early stages of that, or we're starting to see the early stages of that agreement working the way it was intended. So I'd say that's a positive development for North American trade.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. On to Monsieur Savard Tremblay for 6 minutes.
Sorry, I'm not going to be too long. This will take a second. I've kind of lost the habit of the in-person meetings, so I'm getting caught up with the mask and so on. Sorry. My question is for Mr. Zagib. We expect generally that there should be a strong increase in demand for electric vehicles. We are discussing that more and more. In Canada, there are all sorts of investments for public transport electrification. There are tax incentives to urge people to buy electric vehicles. But there are some people, I'm thinking Martin Fortier, which is the CEO of Accelerate. Canada should do more to make sure that the entire supply chain and economy takes advantage of this growing demand in electric vehicles. And he's not the only one saying it. The country wasted a lot of time. The current strategy should have been put in place long ago. Is Canada behind other nations in this area? Well, it's an important question. The timing is right. Today, most electric vehicle companies or normal vehicles, they are moving towards electrification. It's a challenge. So Canada isn't late. We have a very strong ecosystem, and we must take advantage of that. Unfortunately, the lithium-ion technologies that we have in Canada and the United States, they have shifted to Asia somewhat. So we quickly, the federal government, the provinces have to quickly work together to bring about industrialization in this area. And as I said earlier, with DPG there has to be a policy and a strategic plan. So if we quickly get going, it's not late. I was talking about a significant ecosystem in Canada: natural resources, human capital, technology, and our strategic posture in relation to the United States and Europe. And as I said earlier, we already have Ontario that are very strongly implanted in the what we might call normal vehicles, and then in Quebec for cars and trucks and so on. So I don't think we are late, but I think we have to get on board the train as quickly as possible. So how do we do so quickly? Let's say we're not late, but we're looking at our positioning. If we can get ahead of the rest of the world, why not? Why not be ambitious? What can we do along those lines? I can give you the example of the Quebec government, a battery initiative over 5 years with $10 billion. We should bring in investors, manufacturers, invest 50% as we see in the United States and China, assist companies to set up and have 50% sharing between the federal and the provincial, and also find customers. Customers are very important. We have to make sure that the companies that are already existing, that they will transform their gas vehicles to electric vehicles. So you are talking about the policies we can put in place here. That's important. But as you well know, as far as strategic minerals, there is an agreement that has been signed between the current Canadian government and the United States President Joe Biden, an agreement on strategic minerals. Could we have gone further, have a stronger battery policy? And do you think that the confidence in Americans, that the trust is there when it comes to Canada, when we are hearing about policies like Build Back Better in terms of electric vehicles? Earlier, I was talking about security, green chain supply. Canada has the backbone in that area, all those minerals. The core minerals are here, but we have to process them. We shouldn't sell them off. We can make processing the first level. Second, we can go from iodes, cathodes, and cells. So we shouldn't just take iron and so on and process it. Job creation in Canada is very important, and we can become equal partners with the United States in having a common front to come up with a counterweight to Asia. Most of the batteries, electrification of transportation, it's in China, Korea, Japan. It's neither found to a great extent in Canada or the United States. So we have to work closely together. And as I explained earlier, we also have to think about the minerals and the green circular economy, mines, processing, and recycling as an important element, to have a good balance between the urban and natural mines. Thank you for these clarifications. You're saying Canada does have to strengthen its efforts. So when we are negotiating with the U.S., we should be in a position of strength. They should be seen as a serious partner and that deserve more respect. Yes, I agree. We Canadians, we say we have the core minerals, we have human capital, we have intelligence, we have technology. I was talking about iron and phosphate. Today it's used by Tesla, by the entire world. This material is born in Quebec in Canada. This technology has been here for 27 years. And the solid battery was born in Canada, in Quebec. These two technologies are here. And so...
I'm sorry, Mr. Simard-Tremblay, your time is up.
Thank you.
Mr. Massey, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I know that this is actually a really good time for those that aren't aware, and Madam Chair, you've heard this many times before, and Mr. Hoback as well too. I want to thank you for the work on a new border crossing. If I go to my right-hand side here, I can walk in 20 minutes and be in front of a major demonstrations taking place and shutting down the Ambassador Bridge. If I go that way for about 3 minutes, it's the International Tunnel between Windsor and Detroit. And what gives me great concern right now is that we do all this work to try to attract investment and so forth, and we see the destructive practices taking place. The Stellantis plant is down again. Not only did we have a shortage of the microchips this past couple of years, which has been a significant problem, it's also now the production of the supply chain that's been disrupted. So I'm going to ask Mr. Adams this thing to start, and I would invite any other witnesses to chime in. Do they have any other ideas or alternatives or suggestions? We're trying to build redundancy, and I want to thank here in this, Madam Chair, yourself and Mr. Hoback. I mean, you know how many meetings we went in the United States to get a new border crossing. I mean, my first public meeting was 1998 at Marlborough Public School, and how many congressional and Senate rooms we were in to fight back to get it. But maybe start with Mr. Adams, and then to anyone else who wants to chime in. What can we do better with regards to providing redundancy in our supply chain or management practices for our border? Because even if we fight to get some of this new green technology with EV batteries and so forth, if we're not going to have a solid supply chain, or how can we improve that right now to make things better? Because the current status quo obviously is failing us.
Well, thanks very much for that question. I appreciate it. And I think, you hit on one of the key points. And I think I've been around as longer than you have. And, that the Gordie Howe Bridge has been the topic of conversation for a while. So I think once that structure gets completed, which I think we're talking maybe 2024, something like that now, finally, I think that will provide a level of redundancy. But, at the core, we really need all Canadians to operate under the rule of law. And I think right now we're seeing too many places across this country where, some Canadians are operating not under the rule of law, and they're affecting, not only businesses, but in the lives of individual Canadians. And this is very problematic. I think from an automotive perspective, I think what you're also seeing is companies beginning to rethink just-in-time delivery as well, because of the chip shortage that you mentioned, because of other supply chain issues that have occurred. I think they're starting to recognize that they need to perhaps bring more components, whatnot, closer to the assembly facilities, and also have different move away from single source supplying to a certain extent as well. So that would be my comment. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I remember the days when I was working in Plant 3 and Plant 6, didn't even call it anymore, Windsor Assembly Plant, where you'd actually have 2 days stock behind you right on place. So those days are gone now. Would anybody else like to comment on this? I can't read the room or people at home. I just want to open that up in case there is those online that want to mention something.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think that it's a really important question, especially when we're dealing with what we're dealing with today and in this real-time moment. We do need to look at this. I think in addition to border management, physical and access, I think I would ask you to please keep in mind some of the other types of border measures that we need to take care of, because that unfair trade practices into our nation continues at pace, and we are seeing unprecedented levels of unfairly traded imports right now. So I'm just asking for a broad view of borders, not to deter or detract from the importance of this moment in time.
That's a good point. And that's actually, you have all kinds of knockoffs and other types of things. We actually at Industry Committee looked at this before. So thank you for that point. It is something that's really, and also changing some of the ways CBSA officers can actually detain different materials and so forth. So really good point. Thank you. And I think there was somebody else. I apologize if I cut off Mr. Agnew.
No, that's fine. I think just to say there's a lot of measures depending on the sector you're talking about. Some are short term, some are long term. I mean, just to give, 2 trade facilitating measure examples. One, they're looking at new deployments of IT platforms later this year. Industry doesn't think they're ready for prime time. And so I think not layering on things that will further compound the situation actually is one thing that the government can tangibly do to help companies that are involved in trade. Another, for instance, is around export permitting. This is a difficult thing for companies that need to export controlled goods. And again, having the expedited issuing of those permits would certainly help companies that are needing to plug into global supply chains.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I disappear during the meeting, no disrespect to our guests, I'm dealing with the issue down here, and I may not be able to stay for the whole meeting, so I apologize for that. If I disappear, I really don't want to disrespect our guests here today. I will go back through the answers later, and that I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And thank you very much to our witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Massey, and I wish you good luck. We're all very concerned about the issues at the bridges as well. So we'll all be keeping our fingers crossed to get that solved. Thank you all very much. On to Mr. Patzer.
There we go. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to start with the Canadian steel producers. I was just looking through a list of the amount of LNG projects that have been canceled around the world, and of the 11 largest projects, 8 of them were in Canada. So I'm just curious to know, for your member companies, how big of an impact has that had, seeing that many potential projects that would be looking to use Canadian pipe canceled?
Yeah, I can't state enough how challenging things have been in the energy sector. Of course, the steel industry relies on the energy sector as a key customer, and we're working in lockstep together to do what we can to green their supply chain for them through our aspects and also what they're up to. So there is no doubt that Canadian steel in these projects, whether it's an LNG project, frankly, or anything, a bridge project or what have you, is fundamental to the lifeline of the communities and of steel companies, communities. So thank you for the question. And yes, I do agree that these things are challenging for us.
Yeah, and then I was wondering if you could comment just, how much more environmentally friendly is Canadian steel over our competitors' steel? And I'd like to think specifically about Evraz Steel, which is in Regina. They use upwards of 90% of their steel is actually recycled. So I'm just wondering if you could comment further on how much more environmentally friendly our steel is in Canada.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the track record of the Canadian steel industry. It is great to hear the Evraz story. The Evraz story is replicated across the country. I will say that, by third-party reports, and many of them out of the United States, they're pointing to Canadian steel as the greenest in the world and as I mentioned, for number first and second in the world for our 2 production types. So, these are sort of third-party engineering detailed studies that really determine that the Canadian steel industry is doing a great job on being some of the greenest steel in the world, and we're very proud of that fact.
And do you have any statistics that you could present to us, either right now, or maybe it's just in a submission later to the committee, about just how much lower global emissions would be if we use more Canadian steel instead of importing steel?
Again, I can get you some more statistics, but honestly, this is a huge opportunity for our country and frankly for North America. So back to the context of of Canada, US, the North American industry has a lot to be proud of. And if we were to strengthen our North American steel relationship, which further and deal with unfair traders, I think we would save an awful lot of CO2. And we can give you some specific numbers of what awful lot means, but definitely it is a big number.
Awesome. Yeah, if you could submit that to the committee, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to switch my focus over to Mr. Zaghib here. Just wondering if you could share your thoughts on where Canada's at for developing critical minerals domestically. And I ask because I've heard a lot from industry and others about excessive timelines for approval getting in the way, as well as some upcoming potential tariffs under CUSMA with regionally sourcing lithium for EV batteries. I'm just wondering if you had any comments on that.
I believe, you are right. I think the basic of lithium ion is the lithium. But right now, I think we have already lithium in Canada. So we can make transformation. Right now, we can make it on lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. And I believe is made and make transformations here in Quebec or in Canada. I don't think so that there are any issue about CUSMA. But this material, it become critical. I believe this material is better that they go to active cathode material, become precursor also, become like raw materials. In order that we sell these kind of materials, maybe we should add value to make with this material like electrodes or cathode materials like iron phosphate or NMC or NCA. NMC is nickel, cobalt, aluminum with lithium battery. So this is critical, and I believe right now you can see the lithium right now is all triangle of South America, Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia, which mainly dominated by USA and China. And I believe we have like 6 sites of mine here in Canada. We should really accelerate and help them to develop the materials as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. On to Madame Dillon, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would like to ask my question to Mr. Simard. The automobile sector is concentrated in Ontario. As a Quebec MP, can you explain how this tax credit project will have a global impact on Quebec businesses in the aluminum sector that are actively participating in the supply chain that is essential for the Canadian automobile industry? Thank you. Madam Chair, I will answer in French. The aluminum production coming from Quebec and British Columbia, as I mentioned earlier, today in the market context we know of is about 90% leaning towards the United States. What we have to understand here is that Americans who consume 6 million tons of aluminum annually only produce 1 million tons. So they have to import the balance, and Canada does represent about 70% of all the imports towards the United States to meet these needs. For us, in terms of primary production, the tax on electric vehicles and other similar situations would not necessarily have any impact on employment and production because our factories for about 360 days a year will supply the market that is never really out of demand for metal. So that's important of nations such as India, Russia, and other regions in the world. So it's the largest market. It's the most profitable market for aluminum in the world. For primary metals, there is really no impact. Thank you. And as you know, the federal government has come up with significant incentives to encourage people to purchase electric vehicles. How could the United States incentivize the purchase of electric vehicles that are manufactured in North America? Well, from an industry standpoint, once again, for us, the best policy, taking into account what we've done so far, is the need to decarbonize, to reduce the carbon footprint, and giving consumer solutions that gear towards those objectives. We should give people incentives for buying goods with low carbon footprints. So steel and aluminum produced in North America should be incentivized. And to reduce the carbon footprint, in your opinion, would that be the ideal way, as you state, of achieving these goals? Well, as we say, that's how you get the most bang for your buck. For each dollar invested in a vehicle, you will have a lot more impact on the decarbonization of the planet, because the carbon cycle of production will be the lowest possible to deliver a vehicle that will also produce as little carbon as possible. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you very much. On to Monsieur Savard Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This time I will turn to Mr. Adams. There are automobile builders, the heavy vehicles. It's up to you to say if you can answer me or not, but I think you do represent mostly small cars, family cars. But I would still like to ask you the question. Leon Vicinity Motors, they build installations in the United States to protect themselves from the protectionist measures. So they're saying we'll open more and more factories over there, even if the law isn't yet in force, even if we don't really know if it's going to come into force. You still have this anticipatory effect. We want to avoid the bill, so we open factories over there. Do you feel the impact of this Buy America tax credit, the potential future? Can you assess the impact from the perspective of displacing these factories to the United States?
Yes, thank you. It's a very important question, and I appreciate your question. Yes, I think, as I mentioned in my testimony, we are already probably seeing some of the effect of just the threat of an EV tax credit as it's been structured under the Build Back Better bill. Whether or not the tax credit remains as part of any new Build Back Better bill, which is largely dormant at the moment, remains to be seen. But yes, I would say that it definitely does cast a pall over investment in Canada when any vehicles, EVs that would be built in Canada could be potentially prejudiced by a tax credit that would only be applicable to American-built vehicles. So it's tough to go into a market where 85 to 90% of our vehicle production goes when you're at a $12,500 disadvantage.
Est-ce que le Canada
is Canada aggressive enough, tough enough on this important issue?
Well, I think the federal government is doing everything that it can to make officials in the United States aware of the issue and its impact on Canada. As I said in my comments, I think there's some ignorance, with all due respect to American legislators, that they weren't aware of the impact on Canada of those provisions in the Build Back Better bill. And with respect, again, that's a humongous bill. I think it's $1.7 trillion. It includes many things, so it's maybe not beyond the realm of expectation that some regulators in the U.S. would not know anything about the EV tax credit. But I believe the federal government, the consul generals, certainly the trade minister, are actively engaged on this file and are doing everything that they can to find a solution. And that may be a solution that they alluded to in the letter that the trade minister and the deputy prime minister sent last fall.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Adams. I'm sorry to interrupt. On to Mr. Massey, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You can finish your thoughts there, Mr. Adams, please.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of potential retaliatory measures that were outlined in the letter that the Deputy Prime Minister and the Trade Minister sent down to senators last fall.
And I just want to follow up with that. There have been a number of other trade issues with the United States, not just this one. Any suggestions on more of a robust approach to deal with those things? We're going from piece to piece, softwood lumber, dairy, a whole series of things. Any suggestions on that? I mean, it's becoming a whack-a-mole on these things.
Well, it is. And I think we do have, and it doesn't seem to matter whether it was Republican or Democratic, we've got a protectionist sentiment in America right now. And I think, as other witnesses have suggested, and we would concur with that we need to have a more structured and a more engaged full Team Canada approach to ensure that we help Americans understand that when they put in measures, either knowingly or not knowingly, that impact Canadian industry, it also impacts their own industries and their own citizens.
Thank you. To Mr. Simard, a real quick question with regards to the timeframes for getting us more competitive. Can you kind of give us an idea? Like, are we so late to the game, or can we still make up time with regards to EV and in the minerals and the connections?
I believe this. It's very hard for me to answer this question. I think it's more Mr. Zaghib who was handling this subject, if I may say.
Sure. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot that way.
That's okay.
Mr. Zaghib, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe, as I said, the minerals, we should be hard negotiation, but we have, this is very important because they depend a lot on our minerals. And especially for electric vehicles, it can be on the motors, it can be on the battery, it can be on the bodies, and so on. So we need to be sure that we are taking them. And behind that, I said, not only minerals, we have the technology and we have the capital humans. So three of them, I think this is very, very interesting strategy that if we are negotiating with them, this one, you cannot get our lithium, you cannot get our nickel, our cobalt, you cannot get our patent, our technology. IP are very important. The patents are very important. So
Thank
if
you
we can
very
make
much, Mr. Zaghib. Mr. Martel for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Martel.
Oui, excusez-moi.
Sorry. My questions will be for Dr. Zaghib. Mr. Zaghib, it was quite interesting. I followed your exchange with my colleague from the bloc, and I would like to go along the same lines as what you said, phosphate. The phosphate ion lithium batteries, they have several advantages, as you know. That's the life cycle, the efficiency, the lightness, and so on. In the light of all this, everything I can see, how then is it that phosphate is still not yet considered a critical mineral in Canada? Well, the phosphate ion, the most important aspect is the safety. It's the safest battery. Recently, we have heard of a lot of vehicles recalled because of fire. We have this technology in Canada, in Quebec. So we should quickly increase phosphate production, because phosphate is not just for the battery, it's for even food safety. So with iron, there's several applications. Quebec and Canada, we must become a strong producer, and phosphate should be on the critical list for national security issues, because it relates to energy and food safety. Well, Mr. Zaghib, you know, in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, we have a mining company, Allium Phosphates, which has one of the highest phosphate reserves in Canada, and it's a high-quality phosphate. People are aware of this, so why are we not investing in phosphate ion batteries when we do have the resources to do just that? Well, I'll give you an example. Mr. Elon Musk's choice with Tesla for the past few weeks, most of Tesla's electric vehicles will be iron phosphate based. China, they have adopted iron phosphate since the 2010 Olympic Games. It's become a national security issue in China. We have to come up with a strategy with joint funding and so on, so that we can together, not just Quebec, all provinces, iron phosphate should be a significant issue in Canada. There are several applications for phosphate. It's not just batteries. It's a small quantity. We can come up with all kinds of electronic applications. We should we can use phosphate for doping in silicium. So there are all kinds of applications. Mr. Zaghib, during an interview for 1st of October 22nd, you said Quebec is well positioned with our natural resources. You said Canada could come up with several production plants for lithium batteries for the next 3 years. Well, you can see where I'm going with that. Right now, the only plant was meant to be set up in 2023. Why is it that the Canadian government is so slow to come up with these processing industries? Well, I spent 36 years of my life in this lithium area. As I said, we have to give lands to incentivize people to quickly set up. That's what the Chinese and the Koreans and the Japanese are doing. I think it's all about money. The minimum 50% of funding to accelerate things. It has to be a bold project. The Canadian government, along with the provinces, should have the courage to transform energy, especially as batteries are concerned in our country. Mr. Zaghib, how then could we make these critical minerals, the supply chain in Canada, how could we make them indispensable for battery manufacturing, for electric vehicles, especially in the partnership with the United States? Well, the U.S. partnership, they do need us, as I said earlier. We have to discuss with them. In my work, I'm quite cognizant of the fact that most of my research was funded by the Energy Department in the United States. So we must come up with good partners in the government, in technology, minerals, make them understand that we're not just there as a resource-rich area. So, thank you.
Mr. Miao, are you muted?
Can you hear me now, Ms.
There you are.
Madam
Thank
Chair?
you. Go ahead, please.
Sorry about that. I think I got the mute on my button here. So a few of you may have heard from a large range of stakeholder on the Canada and US issue, and I'd like to address this question to Mr. Agnew. In your role at the Chamber of Commerce, would you say that the EV industry has the potential of being one of the biggest threat to the Canadian economy?
Are we talking about the EV tax credits or the electric sort of vehicle industry as a whole? Sorry, just to clarify the question.
I think it's as a whole, but also with the EV tax credit as well.
Yeah, so I think maybe just to talk about the EV sort of industry as a whole. I mean, I think the answer is yes. There's absolutely tons of potential, and I think Mr. Zagreb talked about this in his remarks. And I think when we talk to our members about the potential opportunities here in Canada, there's a major juxtaposition that we can make to our benefit against particularly markets such as China. These are markets that are not sort of reliable and stable sources of supply, whereas we have a lot of these products in the ground, and I think we need to do a much better job of getting them out of the ground. And I think promoting, the Canadian advantage, whether you want to call it a geo-economic advantage or a, natural resource advantage, there's a lot of potential there. And I think we can go to our allies, and not just in the United States, but to the G7 and other Western industrialized nations to really promote the strengths of our domestic, rare earth and critical minerals industry.
And as you also mentioned about the EV tax credit, many stakeholders and industry have been quite vocal on it, and some of them are pretty active engaging with their American partners to echo on their concerns. Picturing the impact of this bill could have on the U.S. operation, do you think the Chamber of Commerce have any other engagement with their counterpart, and what are their response on that?
Yeah, so certainly on a whole host of Buy American issues, we always engage a lot with our colleagues at the United States Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I think, is our best business ally in the Washington D.C. Beltway, and certainly the U.S. Chamber has traditionally taken a very strong line on any type of Buy American measure because they generally do believe and support the importance of cross-border trade.
Thank you, Mr. Agnew, and I'd like to open this question to anyone else on the floor as well.
I guess your question was whether or not the EV tax credit as it's currently outlined is problematic for the Canadian industry?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we would say that it is, because if the intention is for the Canadian industry to produce some of the zero emission vehicles that the government wants the whole industry to sell by 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2035, then we could certainly sell those in Canada. But the reality is that most of the plants in Canada, if not all of them, are currently structured to export 80 to 90% of their production to the United States. So if we're at a $12,500 cost disadvantage shipping EVs into the United States, it's fundamentally problematic for the Canadian industry.
Great, thank you, Mr. Adam, for your answer. And that's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Hoback for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all witnesses for being here. And so many areas to go on and so little time. So let's start off with the Canada-U.S. relationship, and maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Kennedy. You made some comments about being proactive in the relationship and making sure that we're always there, talking in the importance of the relationship between the mutual benefits of trade with Canada and the U.S. So do you want to just highlight a little bit of some of the things that could look like, parliamentary exchanges, just any other ideas you may have in regards to that?
Yeah, happy to, and I know that that some parliamentarians did travel to the United States, I believe in December, which was a good example of what can be done on a multi-partisan basis. There's a great consul general network across the United States that's well plugged into state lawmakers as well as their senators and congressmen and governors. Having a constant drumbeat of officials, of labor, of business, and others speaking to people across the United States about the benefits of the relationship to make sure that in the future, if there's another Build Back Better or something similar, that there's at least an understanding that there's a Canada element to that piece of legislation or whatever the decision happens to be. Really, this, as we saw with the USMCA negotiations, it's a matter of all hands on deck. America is focused on a lot of things right now, a lot of internal issues, but also external, and we really need to do our part to make sure that Canada at least has a bit of attention, given its various focuses. So. Just to say that there's a lot we can do, and actually the moment's a good example. We were very fortunate to avoid.
Mr. Kennedy, I've got only 5 minutes, so you made the point that I wanted you to make for sure. Mr. Agnew, you also talked about the importance of the relationship and what the Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I met with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce pretty well every time I go down there. I try to meet with them. With the interruptions we're seeing at the border, both at Coutts and in Windsor. We're starting to see backup now. For example, the packing plants at Cargill are saying they've got a situation now where they have so much meat in their lockers they can't get it across the border. What would you say to this government in regards to ending those blockades? What do you say in regards to vaccine passports and mandates? And what would your members say in regards to ending the mandates and actually seeing resumption of travel across the border?
So I think there's two separate issues that I'll try to really quickly touch on in terms of the cross-border travel rules. One of the things that we've been quite concerned about, for example, are the requirements for both, the kind of pre-departure PCR test for fully vaccinated travelers, as well as the arrival test people have to do if they are fully vaccinated. So I think that is sort of one measure. In regards to the border blockade piece, we had a statement that we issued yesterday with over 70 industry associations calling for all levels of government to cooperate on clearing those blockades. When we talk about critical pieces of infrastructure, I think the Ambassador Bridge ticks off about as many boxes as you can possibly imagine for being important to the Canadian economy.
Yeah, and I think we all want to see a peaceful resolution to the end of the demonstrations that are going on there, and that we actually see some resolution in regards to the travel across the border. Mr. Agnew, when we talk about the relationship with the U.S. and looking at the U.S. side of things, where do you see potentials to growth? Like I know when I was down there in December, when I mentioned the word rare earths or lithium, their eyes just got big because they see the future in that, and they hate the fact that they have to go to China to get it. Why aren't we spending more time talking about the things we can do together to build the industry together instead of always coming in when there's a problem?
Yeah, I fully agree that we need to be proactive about it. The White House commissioned a bunch of supply chain reviews. The Canadian Chamber participated in the U.S. Department of Defense and Department of Energy ones. And the case that we continue to make is we can't go there with a supplicant list of things that we want them to do for us. We have to make sure that we're talking about what we're doing and how it aligns and actually supports what the United States is also trying to do, because that's how it has to be mutually beneficial for both countries.
Okay, and then my last question, I think, Mr. Adams, it's a very practical question for me as a parliamentarian. I've got $1 to spend, and we want to see this industry thrive. We want to see it grow. Where do I put that dollar? Do I put it into the power companies to get you the plug-in for the electric car? Do I put it in the grid? Or do I subsidize the electric car? Because I think one conversation that hasn't happened across North America and needs to happen is actually how we're actually practically going to put power in these cars. How we're going to plug them in. I've got an older condo here in Ottawa. It was built in the 70s. There is no capacity in that condo right now to allow electric vehicles to charge at night. So where do I spend that dollar?
Very good question. I think if you could find somebody to answer it, you'd be a rich man. But really, I would divide the dollar up into three pieces. We need part of that dollar to go to infrastructure, and that may in some ways be a more important piece than in the incentive. We need part of that to go to incentives, and we need part of that dollar to go to education. Those would be the three key pieces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. Yes, on to Mr. Ryer for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's nice to see the representatives of steel and aluminum industry here today. As they say, we have got the best technologies in steel and aluminum, but there's a big but here. These industries export only to North American market from their Canadian bases. The reason is quite clear. They're all foreign owned and they consider Canada as just a branch. In the last 15, 20 years, hardly there's been any increase in the installed capacity of steel and industries and maybe a small increase in aluminum manufacturing capacity. But that is not the subject of today's discussion. We can approach it later. My question to Dr. Karim Zagib is that very nice to meet you. I've seen your background. And I've been talking about establishing that, have called for a task force to develop and implement a comprehensive strategy for the development of mines to mineral processing to battery technologies to manufacturing of batteries and battery cell packing. And obviously, we all know that China has taken the lead and some parts of Europe have also well established. United States is catching up with a lot of investments, almost 8 to 10 multi-billion-dollar investments in battery manufacturing getting implemented right now in the US, and in Canada we are catching up. Luckily, we do have quite a bit of advantage, I can say, in terms of minerals, as we know that whether lithium ion or phosphate, we do have a lot of critical minerals, and we have got an agreement with the United States on to develop this mineral base here. And in the last budget, we did invest in the Battery Mineral Center of Excellence. And we also have knowledge in our country. As you know that the technology research and development done in the battery technologies in Dalhousie universities partly contributed to the development of the batteries by Tesla and its advancement in this field. Dr. Karim Zagib, my question is, we all talk about developing mines, mineral processing, batteries, etc. But what do you think is happening in terms of the time required to develop these critical mines? Typically in Canada, it takes many, many years for the process to go through. It's normal. In the normal process, it will take multi-years. Have you seen any changes at the provincial level, whether it is Quebec or Ontario, or the federal level, to hasten the process of approval for the development of new mines for these critical minerals?
Yes. What I saw, for example, in Quebec, there will be like task force between Minister of Innovation, Minister of Finance, Minister of Environmental and Energy together in order to accelerate and reduce the time of the permit and so on, because we don't take 10 years, 20 years to develop the mine, is right now. We saw it recently with Nemaska Lithium. For example, Nemaska Lithium is great examples. Is a joint between Investment Quebec, Parinan, Livent, and so on. They're going to accelerate lithium and we're going to see lithium in next 2 years. So we need to have this kind of task force in order to accelerate and to help the permit for environmental permit, construction permit, and land and so on. The mining are very important. You are right for the technology when you spoke about NMC iron phosphate are coming from here. So we need, when we come to this circular economy, so mine, active materials, cathode materials, sand, and so on, we need to have a strategy how to reduce the time.
So
and
we
also,
still need to have, so there is no still comprehensive strategy, whether from the federal government, talking to the provincial government and the industry bodies related to mines, the technologies with the universities. So still there's a need to form a task forced to look into this and implement a strategy?
I believe
brief
so.
answer, sir.
I believe so. In Quebec, the strategy is well done, but I think in federal and province, they should work together as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On to Monsieur Savard Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This time I would direct my questions to Mr. Kennedy. You have called for more rigor in dealing with the United States. You said we must adopt an emergency or even a crisis approach, some sort of daily obsession, and even threatening reprisals. We know that we've heard these threats. There was a list of products that were to be published on this and that would challenge certain points in the CUSMA. Do you think we should expect more toughness from that end?
So if this is in I guess response to the list, or at least the document that was released late last year, I think that in certain circumstances, Canada does need to take a strong position, and we saw that in previous instances that affected some of the other industries that are here today. But in a moment like now, when Canada has the opportunity to be proactive, we can present more of an opportunity for collaboration. But it is always a matter of having a balance between different options and constant engagement, and just making sure that we're ready for anything that comes up. There are many things that Biden administration members of Congress have proposed or discussed that we should be concerned about and be prepared for. And I think we all have different things that we're thinking about, and to the extent that we're ready for that and thinking about how we would respond in the event that things don't go as planned would be helpful.
And so what are some of these reprisals? What should be on the table? What type of countermeasures could we take? Are there certain specific actions you would recommend in those areas?
So we do have, as I mentioned, through USMCA, we do have an enforceable agreement, which is actually unique for Canada as well as for Mexico, in the sense that many of the US's major trade partners can't receive a resolution with the dysfunctioning appellate body at the WTO. So we're fortunate in that sense to have that as an option available to us. But at times we do need to communicate that harm to the Canadian economy, especially when it violates a part of a trade agreement we have, that there are consequences for certain sectors in the United States, certain congressional districts, for instance. But I don't think that that's how we start the conversation. That's really the last option at the moment.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. On to Mr. Massey for 2.5 minutes, please. Is Mr. Massey still with us? I don't see him coming up, so I'm going to go on to Mr. Lewis for 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm going to
hold on, Mr. Lewis.
Good.
The clerk is.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. There was a slight change in the speaking order. Mr. Martel will take the floor next.
So, Mr. Martel, I understand there's been a change in the order. So, Mr. Martel is up for 5 minutes, please.
5 minutes.
Well, 5 minutes. Well, I do have two questions right now. Once again, I would like to address myself to Dr. Zagib. I think it's very interesting to find out from him, Mr. Zagib. Obviously, I would like Canada to be a lot more independent, autonomous in different sectors. But how do you strengthen Canada's independence in terms of supply for active materials for local production of the batteries for electric vehicles, in your opinion? I think, first of all, we have to define our market. It's a market in all provinces. Once we have clearly defined the market, that's what the Chinese do. Once we look at the gigawatt hour, if we do have a market, we have a huge market for energy stocking, then we can really think of an independent strategy. But we do have to think about the international vision, the Canadian market, the U.S. market, and we must not forget Europe, because we do have infrastructures in Canada. We have deep sea ports, we have rail transportation. So if we do our battery materials taking into account traceability, we're talking about aluminum with an ecological stamp, we can really be independent. We're kings in our own castle, and we can export following respecting human rights, environmental rights with zero emissions. Right now, the lithium-ion batteries are mostly produced in China right now. Many European countries, you mentioned Europe, they've come up with a production infrastructure at a local level. Germany with Tesla, Sweden with Volkswagen. Why do you think Canada cannot follow the example of these countries that have even more meager resources than us? Well, I know what exactly is going on in Europe. They have local European companies, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen. In France, you have Renault, Peugeot. Our Fords and GMs, these are not Canadian companies, Toyotas and so on. Canada should come up with a high electric car production quota in our country. We must find companies that think made in Canada, Canadian companies. You're talking about Leon Electric, other examples. The others, they have the market, they have local enterprises, and they have money. We have to think of startups, new companies, support them. But we must strengthen the companies locally. The decisions are being made in the United States, Japan, Korea, not here in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Zaid. No further questions.
On to Mr. Sheehan for maybe 3 minutes, Mr. Sheehan.
Well, thank you very much. And I wanted to thank all our presenters for testifying and providing us with some very good information. I guess I would ask Catherine from the Canadian Steel Producers Association to make two comments. One on, our presenters have been talking about the low carbon economy that the market's going to. And, what the steel industry, including Sault Ste. Marie, is doing to, get off coal. And, how many steel plants in the United States are still on coal? We know that the Chinese have a lot of coal producing, and some comments on that. And then the second piece is, again, just to reiterate, in 2019, when the 25% tariff, the 232s were put on Canadian steel, what kind of advocacy was, in your mind, really worked well that perhaps we should be continuing to take a look at when dealing with other trade irritants? You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Terry. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for both of those questions. We're on a very interesting and important journey in the steel industry. So I've talked already today about our existing green performance, but we have aspirations to do a lot more and ultimately address what is a very significant CO2 emission level to net zero. And so we have done some very interesting work in this space, and in particular, two significant projects have been announced in a partnership with the government, of course, but with others to see 6 million tons of CO2 be eliminated from the atmosphere. This is to convert to EAFs and to have future opportunities as well, with perhaps new feedstocks yet to be defined and developed in our country. So definitely a journey that is going to take time, but that one that we're well underway on and very excited about. You asked about the U.S. I think that's one of the reasons why the U.S. and Canada have such a strong play together on climate and steel. They have done some EAF conversions. So again, back to my remarks, I want to say I think we have huge opportunity to do things right now with the U.S. on climate, particularly as it relates to steel and aluminum, because they've got an EU roadmap. We need to follow that and grab that as soon as possible. As far as the 232 lift, I mean, this was a tremendous effort by many, by industry, of course, but by government in particular, by many horizontal organizations, by provinces, as well as the federal government. We took a Team Canada approach that you remember well, where we actually aligned and fought our battles, and the government was prepared to stand up for the. So I'm seeing a lot of the same playbook this time around on the EV tax credit issue. And at the same time, I'm reminding us that not only do we fight the battles, we also address those issues where we work together. So back to the climate comment, but back as well, sure that we do everything in our power to show the world that we are very good trading partners. We want the US to see that we are just as strict on unfair traders as they are, and that we can basically work in lockstep with them on the battles that we jointly share. So I hope that gave you a bit of an answer, Terry, to your question.
Thank you very much. And Madam Chair, do I have any time left?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Sheehan.
I think so. Okay.
All right. I want to take this moment to thank all of the witnesses for their valuable testimony. And thank you all to our members of parliament that are attending, and everybody's on time. So I will move adjournment. Thank you all very much.